President Trump versus Elon Musk. It is getting personal as the president suggests canceling billions in federal contracts to Musk companies. Another Trump travel ban, travel to America from 12 countries, will be halted starting Monday, with precious few exceptions. The long-promised phone call between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, it happened. The trade standoff continues, but summits are in the works. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. President Trump and Elon Musk are fighting in haymaker social media posts exchanged all day. The spat could affect the fate of the president's economic agenda because Musk now fiercely opposes the legislation that carries it. You might recall that Musk poured more than $200 million last year into campaigns to elect Trump and other Republicans. If that faucet closes, well, that is a story. And Musk this afternoon mused about creating a third party. Is he serious? Vast sums of money and 200 million X-followers might matter if he is. But it's more than the histrionics and politics. Musk and his Doge associates, we need to remind ourselves, had unfettered access to several large federal government databases. And they ran some of the artificial intelligence models known as Grok through some of them. To what effect, we don't know. What Musk and Doge did or did not do with that data and what it learned from it about people, rival contractors, government functions, also remains a mystery. When Musk was part of the Trump inner circle, close enough for Teslas to be featured on the South Lawn of the White House, there was some theoretical supervision of all this. Now, with Trump suggesting he might cancel federal contracts with Musk, who knows where the animosities and threats might lead? In other words, this Trump-Musk divorce, if permanent, could be with us for a long time and in unimagined ways. We begin tonight with CBS News political director Fin Gomez, White House reporter Aaron Navarro, and Politico's Sophia Kai. It's great to have you with you. Fin and Aaron, you have way too many ties for the family table, but I'll overlook that. Fin, let me start with you. What do you make, what should our audience make of what has transpired today? Because it got ugly, and it got ugly in a hurry.
Yeah, the bromance is over. The bromance is dead. You know, I think earlier in the cycle, earlier in the year, we heard...
And billionaire bromances really are of a very special kind.
They are, especially when they're the two of the most powerful people in the country and the world. Like, I think one could argue. And I think what we're seeing now is this schism within the party and within the administration. And it's, you know, and you're seeing it, and it's flaming out in historical proportions here. But these two close allies are now, you know, fighting in a very public setting. And again, you know, I did kind of call this. I did think that this was eventually going to happen. I mean, just ask Mike Pence and others who were once close with Donald Trump. I mean, this is sort of has like the natural sort of like, you know, organic end to this sort of relationship. But the ramifications are significant, both politically and also legislatively, where we are right now with this big, beautiful bill. But also, as you've seen, Musk is already threatening to start a potential third-party entity.
Don't know if he's serious.
Don't know if he's serious. But, I mean, if a man who spent $277 million, the largest single individual donor in the 2024 cycle, wants to get some retribution that way, he can.
Aaron, my quick notes here. SpaceX, one of Musk's companies, just one, 49 contracts with the federal government with a projected potential value just shy of $20 billion.
Yeah, $19.7 billion from SpaceX alone. It's certainly a big impact to Elon's companies, but, you know, the world's richest man has been throwing his money all around. He spent $25 million.
Provides a service to NASA.
That's right. That's right. And he already, the service he's provided for the government, at least that's gotten most attention, right, is the Department of Government Efficiency. It's Doge. And you've seen him kind of embed a lot of people younger than I that worked for him on SpaceX or you know, Tesla that have been ingrained in these federal agencies are still part of these federal agencies to, you know, in his idea, continue the work of Doge. And it was looked over last week, but in the budget proposal from the White House, they actually propose increasing the number of, quote, Doge staffers from 89 to 150, signaling that while there is this very public spat between Elon Musk and Trump, the work of Doge is quietly still being supported by this White House.
Sophia, this disagreement today, which really burst into sort of a vitriolic way on social media, got borderline incendiary with one tweet I know the control room has, reads as follows from Elon Musk's X account. Time to drop the really big bomb. Real Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT. Yikes.
Look, these are two people, neither of whom likes to back down.
Right.
And that is what you're seeing.
Yeah.
I think the crucial period is the next 24 to 48 hours. I mean, is President Trump going to use the might of the federal government to get back at Musk for a tweet like that? And we don't know yet, right? I mean, Trump convened almost a dozen agencies just last week to brainstorm all of the ways in which it could screw Harvard. Are they going to do that to Musk? And they could do a lot. I mean, for one, Aaron just mentioned these 100 or so Doge members. Are they going to kick them out? I mean, is Trump going to ask his cabinet to kick out every single person in the government who was affiliated or hired by Elon?
Finn, it sounds like it might be a job for Steve Witkoff to try to negotiate a rhetorical ceasefire.
Probably.
The president's special envoy in every direction on the globe.
And, you know, who knows, this might be easier than Kim Jong-un or something, you know, like situation. But I do think, you know, back to like the original, one of the original points that Aaron and Sophia brought up, and that is like if let's say Trump does, he's threatening to pull these, you know, the Musk companies out. Let's say he does. You're looking, it's like they've been promised $3 billion over, it's what, over 100 different contracts, 17 different agencies. I mean, including Starlink, including SpaceX, like you're taking astronauts back and forth from the ISS. Like
International Space Station.
Yeah, right, exactly, for the non-space geeks. Mm-hmm. But honestly, like it's
and
you're
Sophia,
taking out serious.
There's also the bill, the legislation that Musk is now a visible opponent of. Now, so far, House and Senate Republicans are doing their level best to try to shrug that off. But there's a following out there on X that might become materially difficult for them to continue to shrug off.
So there's a social media piece, but there's also the crucial question of, is Elon Musk going to spend money defeating Republicans? And, you know, I just spoke to his PAC yesterday, and they have not, as of today, spent money on other Republicans trying to defeat them. That's not to say they can't. I mean, that would be an enormous moving from just words to actions, and that would be a real threat to President Trump's agenda.
And to that point, Aaron, Elon Musk said, if it weren't for me, Trump wouldn't be elected president, and the Senate wouldn't be in majority control, and the House wouldn't have a Republican majority. I'm the majority maker.
Just under $300 million, right, spent from him in 2024. You saw him on the ground in Pennsylvania. You saw him in Wisconsin wearing the cheese head hat. He was supporting Trump. He wanted him to get elected. He was the top Republican donor in a sense. There had been reports that he pledged to donate another $100 million to Trump groups. And even it just shows the elasticity when it comes to Elon Musk and politics, right? He said maybe a week or so ago he was getting out the game. He was done spending money on
the
politics.
donation side, yes.
A couple of weeks before that, you saw him quietly donate to some House Republicans, max out just the 6,600 or so. And now, as Sophia mentioned, what is the America PAC, his super PAC, going to do? Are they going to get involved in the Senate races? And you look on the map, Michigan, a little muddy race there, Georgia, a bit open. Do they get involved down the line?
Go ahead.
And just to add really quickly, I mean, and you know, again, Chris LaSavita, his co-campaign manager, Trump's co-campaign manager, is directly involved in this PAC now. I mean, he's like so.
Which PAC?
In one of the Musk finance PACs for this. So, and he has promised $100 million. Like if he withdraws all this, and the Republicans have a seriously tough battle looking to the 2025 gubernatorial races and the midterms that are coming up. You take out all this money, man, what happens? Like it's like the house of cards falls down when it comes to this political campaign infrastructure. It just does. And also, I talked to a top Democrat just before your show who said, "Look, we welcome this. This helps us.
Of course,
let's go." Like, you know, because
And Aaron, there was other news at the White House today. I don't want to take my eyes off of that. The other news was, for days, White House kept saying President Trump and President Xi are going to talk. Now they have. But what the president said about it was pretty vague, other than that they're going to go see each other.
Right, and I think that was the biggest takeaway, is that these talks are resuming. You saw that big agreement in Geneva between Besant and Chinese officials.
But that was also kind of
vague. And you didn't hear much about it since.
Right.
So that's what I took away, is that there is at least a restart, a resuming of talks. President Trump specifically mentioned rare earth materials used for things like these. Other electronics seem to be that would be the hot topic of that next meeting. But certainly it's still a bit vague. And it's interesting because that's the biggest actor, right, in the president's,
Right, because,
plan.
Sophia, very quickly, the Chinese have put controls on export of these rare earth materials. The president said no one can no longer be confused about the underlying complexity. I don't think anyone was confused about the underlying complexity. Doesn't sound like much progress was made. Might have been. We just don't know.
No, I mean, I think, look, like Trump wants to tangle with these strong men around the world, and now he is. And it's sort of like, well, what have you got?
Sophia Kai, Finn Gomez, Aaron Navarro. Finn, what are you going to do? Oh,
Major, in honor of your show and my debut on your show, can I just go ahead and take
do
off
the Kevin
my
McCarthy
tie?
thing?
Taking off my tie. It's going on the tie rack, and I'm going to grab one and two on the way.
Beautiful. That's it. See you later. Come back. There we go. Tonight, the Supreme Court in 2 unanimous rulings plows new ground on workplace discrimination and stands pat on gun liability.
Andrew Cuomo did lie to Congress.
The people who don't feel safe are young women, mothers, and grandmothers around Andrew Cuomo.
He gets sued 10 times before he gets out of bed in the morning, right?
Kind of like you.
Democratic rivals of former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo piled on in the city's first mayoral debate. And our conversation with former House Speaker Newt Gingrich. We'll discuss his new book on Trump's 2024 victory and how he diagrams the opportunities and perils ahead for the president. Welcome back to the Takeout. Several key Republican senators share some of Elon Musk's concerns that the budget bill now before them will drive up the deficit in the future over the next 10 years. They're also pushing for other changes to this legislation. Someone who's very interested in that conversation is our next guest, House Majority Whip Tom Emmer. He joins me now from Capitol Hill. Tom, it's great to have you with us. Thank you. I know you're jumping out of your shoes, eager to talk about the Elon Musk-Donald Trump confrontation. We're going to set that aside for just a second, because I know you're bullish on this bill. I know you think it's going to have positive economic effects for the country, but I just want to run a couple of numbers by you and ask for your interpretation of them. So this is not a CBO number. This is a Penn, University of Penn, Wharton School of Finance or School of Business budget model. And it says if you're an American making $22,000 or less, the House bill, which you're an advocate for, will reduce your income over the next 10 years by $1,500. If you make more than $5 million, it will increase your revenue by $104,000. Why distributionally is that a good idea for America?
Well, wait, you're assuming that those poor kids at Wharton are actually doing the math correctly. You tell me, Garrett, how they can say the tax policy that's been in place for 7 years that is not changing, it's simply being renewed and made permanent. How is that going to change people's position? And by the way, when you add no taxes on tips and you add no taxes on overtime, that's going to cost people money? No, that's actually going to increase wages and take home for working men and women in this country. So I don't know what they're doing over at Wharton, but I don't accept that at all. Maybe we should get some of them over here so we can walk them through what the numbers are.
I'm sure they'll appreciate the invitation. The Congressional Budget Office says that under the policy that they reviewed in the House-passed bill, up to 11 million Americans, either through the Affordable Care Act changes or Medicaid, will lose coverage. Ross Vogt, head of OMB, says no one in America will lose coverage. No one or 11 million. Is it somewhere in between?
Yeah, no one's going to lose coverage except for, where I would disagree with Russ, is 1.4 million illegal aliens are no longer going to be on Medicaid. And I think Americans, regardless of their political persuasion, agree with that. Everyone else, no one was kicked off, Garrett. Major, sorry. You
do that all the time, Tom, but I always forgive you.
I know. I'm sorry. Too many hits to the head. Nobody's going to be kicked off. Under the Biden administration, they stopped checking verification. They stopped verifying eligibility. I suppose if there are people who are not eligible for Medicaid who have been receiving it, they won't receive it because they're not supposed to be on the program. And then we have these very modest work requirements. Someone has to, an able-bodied, working-age single adult without dependents will have to work looking for a job or being trained for a job 20 hours a week or volunteer 20 hours a week or be in school full-time, or they aren't going to be eligible. I think it's pretty reasonable. And by the way, that means that no one is losing their coverage that is supposed to have coverage unless it's by their choice and or you're an illegal alien. Then you will not be covered by Medicaid.
Tom, I want to play for you a soundbite from an interview that my colleague Maurice Dubois did with the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And Hakeem Jeffries, who I know you're an enormous fan of, was describing what he regards as a civil war within the Republican Party. Please listen.
What we see right now is a Republican civil war. Elon Musk is attacking the GOP tax scam, this reckless budget that's going to hurt everyday Americans. House Republicans are attacking Senate Republicans. Senate Republicans are attacking House Republicans.
Tom, is that what's happening?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's really interesting to hear that from my friend Hakeem Jeffries, because the Civil War is actually in my grandfather's Democrat Party. I mean, you got the progressives, the Marxists, the socialists attacking the swing seat members. You've got DNC vice chairs who are bringing primaries against longstanding governing type Democrats. It's pretty wild over there. So it's pretty interesting to hear Hakeem try to take the Civil War that he is not going to be able to manage on his side and try to equate that to what's happening on the Republican side. The Republican side has never been more unified. Donald Trump is doing exactly what 77 million people elected him to do. And look, Republicans are great at having debate. But as you've seen in the House, Major, when it comes time to get the job done, we get the job done, and we'll keep doing it.
What about Trump and Elon Musk? It really blew up today and got very personal, very quickly, pretty nasty. Musk talking about Trump and the Epstein files. Trump talking about canceling federal contracts with Musk companies. How do you read all that?
Well, that's between the president and Elon. Here's what I know. Elon disagrees with the bill. President Trump is the guy I agree with. This is a great bill, and I've already told you why. This is going to be the greatest deficit reduction bill in the history of this country. It is going to prevent the largest tax increase in this country. And those young people over at Wharton may want to look, because in my district, if we have a $4.5 trillion tax increase because we don't get this thing done, the average family is going to have a almost 20% increase in their taxes, Major. This is going to seal the southern border. It provides money for defense. I agree with the president that the big, beautiful bill is a great bill for America. And it's going to kick off his golden age that he campaigned on and that he's assured the American people they are going to experience.
Tom, what are the conversations you and House Republican leaders having with Senate Republicans about changes that are coming? Can the House conference accept those changes, and will all this get done by January 4th?
Well, I'm not going to get into specific conversations.
July 4th, forgive me, July 4th.
I don't do that. But I'm not going to tell you I talked to this person or that person. I'll let other people do that. I'll tell you, the one conversation, one of the conversations that I may have had was more about what's going to happen in the House. And do you expect we're just going to take whatever you send us? My answer was no. I expect you're going to make some changes. Hopefully, you're going to keep those changes modest. Because if you do anything dramatic, then we might have a problem. But I expect that they will do the things that they think are important. I think they will leave the structure of the bill intact, and they will send it back with the savings that are in it and the changes that they make. And then we're going to pass it and get it to the president's desk. Yes, on or before July 4th.
Tom Emmer, the House Majority Whip from Minnesota. Tom, I appreciate it. Thanks so much. You're always welcome here in the studio.
Thank you, Major.
Couple of wins in the Supreme Court, one for gun makers and another for some workers claiming discrimination. The takeaways from those two rulings next here on The Takeout. Welcome to The Takeout. Thanks for staying with us. Here's a look at what else we, now you, are watching this evening. Israel has recovered the remains of 2 Americans killed by Hamas in the October 7th, 2023 attack on Israel. Operating on intelligence Israel said came from Hamas fighters, Israeli forces found the bodies of Judy Lynn Weinstein and Gadi Haggai in southern Gaza. Weinstein, 70, taught English to special needs children. Haggai, 72, was a retired chef and jazz musician. 56 hostages remain in Hamas captivity. 20 are believed to still be alive. CBS News senior White House reporter Jennifer Jacobs was first to report the Trump administration is ending an aviation screening program known as Quiet Skies. Started in 2010, Quiet Skies was designed to screen for terror threats, but also saddled travelers with cumbersome and invasive airport searches. Some prominent figures have been caught in the Quiet Skies net, among them Tulsi Gabbard, now Director of National Intelligence, and the husband of New Hampshire Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen. The Supreme Court did something today that happens more often than you might think. It ruled unanimously on two pretty big cases, and high-profile liberal justices wrote the opinions. For details, I want to turn to Jan Crawford, who joins us from the Supreme Court, and Camilo Montoya Galvez, who joins us from New York with details on the president's travel ban. Jan, I want to start with you. Catch us up on this Ohio ruling about a woman who claimed because she was straight, she was discriminated in an employment context.
That's right, Major. Marlene Ames, she had worked 30 years at the Ohio Department of Youth Services. She put in for a promotion, and then instead of getting the promotion, she got passed over, and then she actually got demoted, and two gay employees took those spots. So that's the story. I mean, that's how it started. She thought that amounted to discrimination. Now, we went out to Akron, Ohio, and sat down with her back in February before the court heard arguments. Let's listen to her and see how she describes it.
They put a 25-year-old man with less than 3 years of service in our agency to do my job that I had successfully done for over 5 years.
That amounted to discrimination because you believe he got the job because he was gay and you're straight.
Correct. It was humiliating going to work every day.
Humiliating.
Yes.
They cut your salary almost in half.
Yes, $40,000. So, of course, I went into a panic over that.
Now, lower courts threw out her lawsuit. They said because she was a member of a majority group, a straight woman, she had to jump through this extra hoop before she could even get her day in court. And today, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that was wrong. They said that federal anti-discrimination law doesn't require that extra burden on straight people, on white people. In a unanimous opinion by Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the justices said basically discrimination is discrimination, whether you're white, black, gay, or straight. There's no different rules for getting your day in court. So, Major, this means that now she can try to win. Like, she'll get to actually try to prove her lawsuit. But it also means that this will affect at least 20 other states and the District of Columbia. Courts followed the same rules in those states. So this will kind of make the entire country now have the same rules for everyone.
And, Jan, also an important ruling on gun manufacturer liability.
Major, this one was also unanimous, which I think is important to point out because we think of this court as so deeply divided and at each other's throats all the time. The justices today rejecting arguments by Mexico in a $10 billion lawsuit that gun manufacturers should be held liable for cartel violence in Mexico. A federal appeals court actually agreed with Mexico, said that they could try to prove that case in a trial. But the justices today said that a 2005 law that Congress passed, which shields gun makers from liability if their products harm other people, that law just simply doesn't allow this kind of case. And if you think it should, try to get Congress to change the law. But they rejected that, reversed the appeals court. Mexico will not be able to go forward with this lawsuit. A big victory for gun makers, obviously.
Jen, thank you very much. I'm going to turn now to Camilo Montoya Galvez in New York. Camilo, catch our audience up on the Trump travel ban, what it means, who it affects, and other possible consequences, including reaction.
Hi, Major. This is the latest step taken by the Trump administration to curtail and restrict legal immigration to the U.S., this time on national security grounds. This action by President Trump amounts to a full immigration and travel ban on 12 countries, most of them in Africa and Asia, but that list also includes Haiti here in the Western Hemisphere, and another 7 countries, most of them in Africa and Asia as well, but it also includes Cuba and Venezuela, face partial bans on travel and immigration to the U.S. And President Trump is justifying this restrictive measure on the grounds that these countries, Major, do not have sufficient vetting policies and do not share sufficient information to the U.S. government to screen their nationals coming into the U.S., and that some of them do not cooperate in terms of accepting U.S. deportations. And while the Trump administration, the first term around, faced a lot of legal challenges, Major, when it came to travel bans issued by the president back in 2017 and 2018. This time around, the Trump administration is confident that this will pass legal muster because in 2018, the U.S. Supreme Court held that the president has sweeping and broad powers to restrict the entry of foreigners on national security grounds.
And Camilo, this was done in the context of a terror attack in Boulder, Colorado this weekend. The person arrested and now charged was from Egypt, overstayed a visa, but Egypt is not on this list.
Egypt is not on the list, but Egypt is included in one provision of the proclamation, and that part of the proclamation, Major, instructs the Department of Homeland Security and other agencies to review Egypt's vetting policies to determine if any other immigration restrictions on that country are warranted.
And Jan, back to you at the Supreme Court. What else are we awaiting this term?
Well, you know how I said all these decisions today were unanimous, Major? I don't think we're going to get a lot of unanimous decisions going forward. The most contentious cases still remain. Those divide the justices like they divided the lower courts, including a major ruling on whether states can ban medical transition for children who identify as transgender. I think that's a big one. Another one on whether or not parents can opt out of story time, basically, for their elementary school-age kids if it has books with lesbian or gay or transgender themes or characters. That's a big religion case. And then, of course, we have the Trump case. The first case they've taken up in this new Trump administration arguments they held last month on whether or not the nationwide injunctions that were handed down in the birthright citizenship challenges, whether those nationwide injunctions exceed a judge's power. I mean, those are just a few, Major, but it is going to be quite a lot, and I think these will divide these justices pretty significantly.
On a very heavy news day, Jan Crawford at the Supreme Court, Camila Montoya Galvez in New York. Thank you very much for giving us all that perspective and information. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. New York City's Democratic mayoral candidates face off in a heated debate. That and much more next here on The Takeout. Welcome back. Yes, guilty. We can't stop talking about it. A power dynamic now under stress in full public view. Not long ago, President Trump and Elon Musk, head of several global tech companies, were virtually inseparable and seemingly on the same page about everything. Not anymore. Before we get to that breakup, though, here's a look at their once chummy alliance.
His name is Elon Musk. He saved free speech.
President Trump must win to preserve the Constitution.
You could call him an employee, you could call him a consultant, you could call him whatever you want, but he's a patriot.
All we're really trying to do here is restore the will of the people through the president.
He gets it done. He's a leader.
Well, I expect to continue to provide advice whenever the president would like advice.
I hope so.
I promise you we'll get to the Elon Musk thing and Trump in a minute, but here at the family table, I'm joined by Democratic strategist Jaime Moore, who served as Chief of Staff to DNC Chair Jamie Harrison, as well as Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez, CBS News political analyst. We'll do the Musk thing. I know you're chomping at the butt, Leslie. I know you want to get in on it, but there was a debate last night in New York City between Andrew Cuomo, the undisputed frontrunner, and everyone else, and they piled on. They piled on all night long, 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Who won?
Well, that's hard to say. I think Cuomo would say he didn't lose, but Governor Andrew Cuomo, as people know, is running for mayor of New York now. And he's staging a big political comeback. And the current mayor, Eric Adams, is running as an independent. So last night was a Democratic debate. And so it featured Cuomo and about 7 or 8 other candidates. There are 2 that are hot on his hills, Zoran and Alexander, who's the city council president right now. As you saw, Cuomo was the target of all of these candidates because, one, he resigned as governor of 2021, as you guys remember, after COVID, doing a potential or a scandal around
sexual
harassment. He denied both of those, and he apologized for his potential wrongdoing. He reiterated those same things last night. Most of those candidates did not believe that. And so what you saw last night was a debate between potential corruption, as they're calling it, and inexperience, as Cuomo's calling it, with the other candidates. And so I'm not sure how this is all going to start out, but I don't think anyone won last night.
Zoran Mamdani, you said on the heels, somewhat close.
Somewhat close, yeah.
But Cuomo's still the
by
front
double
runner.
digits, yeah.
Endorsed today by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
So that's going to be a big
meaningful?
deal. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but as we've seen, AOC has become not only a national voice, she's become very popular around her state in New York, which she is flirting with a potential primary of Chuck Schumer. And so she spent a lot of time in the state of New York, a lot of time in the city of New York, started campaigning with donors, campaigning with sub-party activists. And so this is a big deal for him to have that endorsement.
All right, Leslie. I know you want to jump in. Come on, come on. Contextualize Elon versus Trump.
Well, aside from the clash of the titans, and we're seeing this firestorm, explode all over X.
I mean, super personal, really fast.
It really is. But I mean, you have the most powerful person in the world and the richest person in the world, and there's no guardrails on that. And it's so shocking because they're honestly, most people would hold back to some degree with some degree of decorum or expectation, restraint. And you don't really see that, but that's traditionally both of their styles. Okay, but one thing I'm going to say is regardless of all of this, they still have a lot in common. They still have a shared purpose, and they have, I would argue, a shared enemy. They are both very concerned about the continued kind of economic competition and national security issues of China.
Right.
That's not going to go away easily. It's not going to go away at all. And it's that old adage, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I think fundamentally these two are going to come back in alignment. Are they going to be frenemies? Are they going to be best friends? No. But that's one part. But real quickly, I said the other part is that it is the realignment of this new Republican Party. You have this very young conservative base that likes Elon Musk, that really pushed Trump over. And you have the fiscal hawks that have always been part of the party. And they're really concerned about raising the debt ceiling.
But what about the money? What about Elon's money? If he pulls that off the table or starts dropping it into primaries about somebody who's voted for this bill, does that mean? I mean, what does that mean?
I don't really think we're going to get to that point.
Okay.
I really don't. I think there's too much both with federal contracts. If the president wants to see Golden Dome, if you want to build that national security apparatus, if you really do want to increase 10x U.S. manufacturing, like experts say that we need to do, they have to come together. They may not like it, but I think the world knows it.
Jaime, your sense of all this?
Look, I think Democrats are happy to not be talking about Joe Biden declining in an in-party fight.
I bet they are.
I think that's just a reality. But look, I think
not a news flash.
It's not a news flash, but I do think we knew that this was going to come at some point. This marriage of inconvenience, as it is now, was never going to last. And so I think what Democrats are trying to do right now is two things. One, reiterate that they have thoughtful ways of governing this country, and two, drive a wedge between the Republicans. And I think Elon Musk and Donald Trump's marriage has been advantageous.
And wave the chaos card.
And what you've seen in the last couple of weeks is Democrats have been a part of chaos, and now it's Republicans.
You mentioned Joe Biden, former president of the United States. The president today, President Trump, talked at some length about the Autopen.
Yeah.
Calls it a huge scandal. Massive incompetence. People were signing things that Joe Biden as president was unaware of.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think some of that is ludicrous. I think
some of it.
Well, I mean, look, there are things that are going to be. There are things. Well, we don't know. I think there are going to be things that are going to be signed by Autopen. That's just what it is. But I think the issue is Donald Trump spending too much time talking about Joe Biden. I think what we have to talk about right now is how we're going to move this country forward. We spent the last 10 hours watching a fight between the richest man in the world and the most powerful man in the world when we have real national security issues right in front of us across the country and across the world. And so I think Democrats are saying, look, Joe Biden was not perfect, and there are things that we definitely want to atone for, but we got to move forward at some point.
Leslie, is this a MAGA-based conspiracy theory or something real?
No, it's something real. I mean,
why?
It's real because there is not a clear understanding of who was running the White House,
or what was
running
signed.
the government, what was signed, who was in charge, who
Under
was really making the protocols, all of those efforts. It needs to be very transparent, and there needs to be accountability to that sense. But just to wash it away and say, well, it's over, it was a previous election, it's a major disruption in our continuation of our democracy, and it has to be investigated.
Leslie Sanchez, Jaime Moore, thank you very much. Our next guest has stood by Donald Trump since the very beginning of his political ascendancy. Now, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich is diving into what he calls, quote, America's greatest comeback in a new book. He joins me here in the studio after a break. You're watching The Takeout.
Everybody else talked about how they'd like to sort of change Washington a little bit in a calm, social way. This guy's going to kick over the table. I want you to give a great Ohio welcome to the next president of the United States.
When Donald Trump first ran for president, our next guest described Trump to me not as a real estate baron, TV star, or outsider, but as a combination of three American giants: Theodore Roosevelt, P.T. Barnum, and Andrew Jackson. Newt Gingrich was on board back then, still is. He joins me now to discuss his new book, Trump's Triumph, America's Greatest Comeback. Mr. Speaker, great to see you.
Great to be with you.
Why is this a great comeback? Why is it historically resonant in the experience of our country?
Well, two reasons. One, the movement against the Washington establishment began with Goldwater in '64.
Barry Goldwater, yeah.
And in fact, you can still go to YouTube and pull up Reagan's speech, A Time for Choosing, which he gave for Goldwater, and it's as resonant today as it was in 1964. And so you had a gradual, steady growth of people who concluded that the Rooseveltian coalition, the big government bureaucracy, the increasingly left-wing views.
Carried on by Lyndon B. Johnson, Barack Obama.
Johnson expands it. Then you have, in a sense, you have the Obama-Biden final explosion, where it gets sufficiently weird on social values that Democrats now tend to be in about a 15 to 20% position on things like,
cultural issues.
Cultural issues. And then you have the failure of big government. I mean, the bureaucracies are now so old, they're so bureaucratic, they're so process-centered that they can't get anything done. So all these things came together. In a sense, in 16, the man and the message, or the man and the movement, came into the same place.
Trump.
Trump had the basic marketer's understanding that there was a potential to build an echo chamber in the country. And he did it by being very vivid, very direct, using very strong language, and talking at a level that blue-collar workers could understand and could say, yeah, that's right.
I wrote in my book, Mr. Trump's Wild Ride, that at Trump rallies, people felt that they were smarter because he was saying what they believed.
Right.
And that's an uncanny, important thing to do in politics, where your audience comes along with you.
But it's part of why you end up with the never-Trumpers, because what Trump was doing was saying to everybody who was disgusted with academic elites and news media elites, et cetera, they're really wrong and you're really right. Well, everybody he's saying is really wrong got pretty pissed off about it. And I think it also scared him, because he wasn't supposed to be able to do this. And then when he won the first time, beating 16 other Republicans, some of whom were very competent, then beating Hillary, who I think everybody in the establishment assumed would win, then surviving a 4-year assault in which we now know both the FBI and the CIA broke the law trying to destroy him. And he survives 2 efforts to impeach him. There's a rigged election in 2020. He gets 4 years in the wilderness. And in that 4-year period, his base keeps growing, because people look at what the Obama-Biden system has created and they go, this is crazy, which is why he could beat Biden in the spring, pivot, and beat Kamala in the fall. And nobody's ever done this before. And it's because his base didn't move.
Right.
His base was for him against Biden. His base was for him against Harris. And his base keeps growing.
So we're not going to go over the etymology of rigged. I know what you mean by rigged, but that election was not stolen in 2020. I know you have problems with it and the media amplification and high tech, but it wasn't stolen at the ballot box.
It was not stolen on Election Day, but it was rigged for months.
Understood. We'll leave it right there.
We can have that debate someday.
Some other time. I want to ask you about your own role in Republican politics and the coalition that Trump has built with working class Americans, aggrieved by free trade agreements that when I covered you back in the 90s, you were for.
Right.
Not just NAFTA, but permanent normalized trade relations with China. Were you wrong about that then? And how do you look back on that advocacy? Did you misread history, or did things happen that you were not expecting? And how did that figure into the Trump coalition?
Look, I think I misread history. I did a book a couple years ago with Claire Christensen called Trump and China. And in doing it, I went back and did a lot of research on Deng Xiaoping. In the 90s, I believed that Deng Xiaoping had made his great Southern tour and made his speeches where he said we have to have free markets, that I don't care whether it's, a black cat or a white cat. I care if it catches the mouse. And he was saying, don't just be trapped by communism. Well, almost all of us thought this is the great first step towards freeing up China.
And with economic liberty and capitalism, you create the desire for political reforms that protect those things.
And then after Tiananmen, we began to look at it, and I realized when I went back to do this research that I had it exactly backwards. That Deng Xiaoping was one of the 24 people in Paris who created the Chinese Communist Party. They were workers during World War I. Then he goes to Moscow and spends a year at Lenin University studying how to run a Leninist party. He comes back to China. What he's saying to them is, the dictatorship will not survive if people stay poor.
But it can survive if they make wealth.
If we're actually going to get wealthy in order to preserve and strengthen the dictatorship, that's exactly the opposite of what everybody thought, including me.
And NAFTA, which Trump calls the worst trade deal ever.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was the worst trade deal ever because there were some others. But it was a mistake in this sense. I think we thought you would create, in a sense, a common market, which Reagan had advocated. So in a sense, Clinton was picking up a Reagan idea. And we thought that the three countries would grow together. And I think what we underestimated was that you would literally have a huge flow of jobs into Mexico, where that the income disparity was so enormous that, in fact, you couldn't create a common market because you couldn't stand, unless you wanted Americans to get a lot poorer, you couldn't be competitive head-to-head with the Mexican economy.
Politically, is there more connective tissue between Ross Perot and Donald Trump or Pat Buchanan and Donald Trump?
Well, both in narrow ways. I mean, Perot in the sense that he represented a...
Because he headed NAFTA, it's called a big, giant sucking sound, all that.
Well, and he represented a kind of very aggressive cut the budget, very aggressive populism. Buchanan represented, in many ways, a reversion to an American conservatism that had been very tough about protecting America and didn't have any kind of blinders about how dangerous the world was. But at the same time, and this is where Trump actually, I think now has some very interesting challenges. Buchanan also represented a belief that you don't send people to Afghanistan for 22 years. You don't send them to Iraq for 20 years. And that and Reagan was very good about this. I mean, people forget the only overt military action that Reagan took was Grenada.
Right,
I mean, he built up a huge military. He was crushing the Soviet Union, but he wasn't getting involved in wars.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to have you back. We're going to continue this conversation about history, technology, and Trump, I promise. You'll come back.
I hope so.
Very good. Newt Gingrich, pleasure, sir. Thank you. That does it for today. On tomorrow's show, I'm joined by former Republican Congressman David Jolly as he enters the race for Florida governor as Democrat. Plus, sometimes on the Takeout, we dine in. Colorado Democratic Congressman and former Army Ranger Jason Crow gives me his thoughts on the upcoming military parade to honor the Army and President Trump's birthday. Stick around. The Daily Report coming up next on CBS News 24/7.